Dan, I'm now going to ask you what I've been calling my rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Dan, do you remember the instance when you first decided you wanted to be an attorney?
You know, when I was out of law school and I had worked for a while, initially I sold real estate in upstate New York, and then I decided I wanted to take a closer look at law, and I got a job as a paralegal down in Baltimore, and had a sense of what lawyers did, and I thought it was something I could be pretty good at. And honestly, it was an indoor job that you didn't have to wear a hairnet for, and that seemed like a pretty good opportunity to me at the time.
Do you have a favorite attorney or a favorite firm to litigate against?
You know, I've always enjoyed working with some firms more than others. I always found Wachtell Lipton to just be a fascinating law firm because of the quality of some of the lawyers there, some really smart lawyers. I've always enjoyed working opposite Wilmer Cutler. I guess it's Wilmer Hale now.
Right.
I just have found that they're extremely intelligent lawyers. But it's funny, I just resolved a case yesterday and wrote a note to the defense lawyer on the other side about what a fine job I thought he'd done. And it's interesting, you come away really with a lot of respect for lawyers on the opposite side of our cases, and you find them in all different types of firms. There's just a lot of very good lawyers out there.
What do you think the biggest change to the class action landscape over, say, the previous 5 years has been?
I guess I would say it's probably an increasing emphasis on part of courts. I think courts are, in class actions on some level, buyers of legal services. And I would say there's been a continuous progression on the part of courts in becoming more and more sophisticated as buyers of legal services. And by that I mean that they're asking more and more questions about how plaintiffs' lawyers organize themselves on the plaintiff side and how cases are settled and why. And so I think, you know, it's sometimes called front loading, but I think that scrutiny is appropriate, but I do think it's a new feature. I don't know if it's going to continue in the same direction or if courts will feel more confident that they've upped the game of the lawyers who practiced before them. But from our point of view, it's changed things a lot, simply that we're devoting a lot more time to dotting I's and crossing T's at the resolution stage just to make sure we get it right the first time.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What is your favorite legal movie?
You know, I love Michael Clayton. I just think Sidney Pollack's character in that movie is just spot on. And overall, I feel like that movie, obviously it's dramatized, but I feel like it depicts the environment in complex litigation as well as any movie. I love The Rainmaker just because the acting in that movie's great at all levels. And I guess I would say those two, I probably have to go watch them again every couple of years.
What is your favorite non-legal movie?
You know, there's a movie with John Turturro and Sam Rockwell called Box of Moonlight that I just love. That it's really a great movie. Very little happens in it. This stressed out guy who's an engineer takes a weekend off and he hangs around with Sam Rockwell's character, who's a kind of a backwoods, off the grid guy, and they meet a couple girls and have a party, and that's about the movie. But it's just a wonderful movie.
It's a great title.
Yeah, it's, for some reason, I don't know, it reminds me a little bit of the small town environment I grew up in on some levels, and there's just the humor for some reason really strikes me as pretty great.
I'll check that one out. Do you have a book that you like to give as a gift?
Yeah, there's a book that was, it was a novel that was published posthumously, meaning after the author died, called Confederacy of Dunces by an author named John Kennedy Toole. I think it came out in the early 60s, and I think it's just one of the funniest books I've ever read.
What do you think is the biggest growth area in class action litigation?
You know, I guess when you talk about a growth area in class action litigation, question of sustainable growth versus growth. I mean, I think the area all of us are struggling with is data privacy. We all think these cases are important. Consumers think they're important because consumers call us and they want to be represented. They're concerned about these cases. I feel like the legal system is pushing back on the cases with the law of standing and whether you have sufficiently alleged an injury that gives you the right to be in court. We've struggled to some extent with these cases as to whether they're right for us or not, and have gone back and forth more than I would like to admit as to whether we can really make a difference with these cases. I do think it's an area courts are going to continue to wrestle with, though, in the years ahead, because everyone feels like there's something happening with regard to their control of their personal data that's not right, and no one's really got a great answer for it. And it may not be one that we as lawyers in the court system can do that much about, as opposed to meaningful legislation.
Do you think there'll be a legislative fix? Are we going to see something?
You know, it's one of these areas where I feel like the EU is probably leading the United States right now for a lot of reasons that people on our side of the V consider to be unfortunate reasons, that the tech companies have too much influence over our legislative system right now. I don't know if it's going to take more of the types of revelations that have come out with regard to some companies in terms of the misuse of data, the failure to protect data, to create the kind of consensus that would lead to legislation. But I do think we'll see at least some legislation, whether it's the legislation that serves the interests of the tech industry or the public remains to be seen.
We'll see, right? Do you have a nonprofit, legal or not legal, that's particularly near and dear to your heart?
You know, we've been supporters of the Impact Fund here in Oakland. We have tremendous respect for Jocelyn Larkin and her team over there, and believe that they have had a vision for a long time and have contributed quite a bit on the side of justice, and so we've been proud to support them. It's hard to distinguish among the many organizations we have supported. We've supported the National Consumer Law Center with contributions and asked for courts to approve Cypre donations to NCLC. I think it's hard to play favorites because it necessarily means you're leaving someone else out who may have just as worthy a cause. Obviously, when we're talking about donating remainders from class actions, you have to fit it within a pretty narrow box, and NCLC for us has fit that bill. But we greatly respect the work that a lot of legal charitable organizations are doing, supporting the public, bringing legal services to people who would otherwise not have access to them.
There's no shortage of good people doing good things in legal services.
Exactly.
Would you advise the next generation to go to law school?
You know, I'm struggling with that now with one of my daughters who's considering it. And I think you really have to want to be a lawyer. I think you have to realize that being a lawyer really is a commitment of time. It's not something you can do anything other than, 110% or whatever the expression is, but you really have to commit yourself fully to it and want to practice law as opposed to doing it because you couldn't figure else out you really have to want to practice law as opposed to doing it because you were bad at math or you didn't want to go to business school. I think it really demands a commitment, and I think if you're not willing to look at it in an entrepreneurial way in the sense of wanting to create a practice of your own, if you just want to get a job, I'm not sure it's the greatest place to go get a job. If you want to build a practice, if you want to be a thought leader in a particular area of law, I think it can be a great career still. And I don't regret the decision. I feel like it's been challenging. It's something I still feel like I can get better at, and the days still go quickly when I'm in here working. And so that seems like a pretty good thing in terms of a career.
That's rewarding.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most beautiful courthouse in the United States?
Boy, you know, we have some courthouses here in California that are pretty picturesque. I always think of the courthouse in Auburn on the way up to Tahoe. That is a courthouse right out of the gold rush days in the Old West, which is a lot of fun to look at. I think our federal courthouses across the country are splendid. I hope that they're open and accessible to all, and that our Supreme Court will reconsider its arbitration jurisprudence so that more individuals have the opportunity to see the inside of those courthouses.
Dan, if you had one piece of advice to impart on a young lawyer just starting out, what would it be?
I think I would suggest for a lawyer just starting out to really think about whether you can be a thought leader in a particular area of the law. And by that I mean take some area that you practice in and really push your understanding of that. Read all the articles, become knowledgeable about it. Usually those things come up where you're asked to research a particular issue, you become familiar with it. If you get into the habit of looking at it just because you're interested and letting your curiosity run a little bit and then write something about it, participate in groups like the American Bar Association or other bar organizations, you start to develop a habit of contributing to the development of the law, networking with other people that have a similar interest in the law. And over time, I think you build your own network, and as your peers assume positions of increasing importance and responsibility, you grow with them and you develop a name for yourself. And I think it's really how you build a practice. And building a practice is how you build independence so that you're not dependent on a law firm or a senior partner for your flow of business because you built your own name. And I think it really starts with just having an interest in the law and in other people.
I think that's really sound advice.
Thank you.
Dan, thanks again for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.